My name is Alexis Miller, and I will be providing the final points on this topic. Wild Mustangs are an iconic symbol of the Old West in America. They're the definition of freedom and liberty, and essentially everything that we stand for in the USA. 40, 30, or even 20 years ago, these Mustangs were not seen to be a problem for the population. Recently, with our growing population and more farmland being used, these national icons now present a problem to crop damage, property damage, and a simple, so they say, lack of room for them. Or that those are the points that people for the roundups present. However, who are we to decide where they live or if they are in captivation? The use of helicopters to round up these horses causes an incredible amount of stress. When horses are put through an unfamiliar amount of stress for an extended period of time, they develop a condition known as stomach ulcers. And this is seen frequently in horses that are in captivation or are suddenly captured and put through a intense training period, which these Mustangs are, to get them tamed down and trained in order to be either adopted or shipped off to wild Mustang, essentially reprogramming. So the symptoms of these stomach ulcers are incredibly painful. These include weight loss, lack of appetite, reduced quality in hair coat, and other nervous habits like pacing, pawing, weaving. Even some will stick their tongue out as a sign of pain in their stomach. Oftentimes, these horses will also colic, which is a twisting of the intestines, and if it is not reversed in time, it does lead to death. Um, so all of these are a result in a rapid change of environment. All of these Mustangs do obviously go through a rapid change when they are out in the wild doing their own thing, and all of a sudden they're put into captivation with the use of helicopters, and they have a human contact that they are not familiar with. To remedy that sudden change of environment issue, conservationists tried to give the mares a form of birth control. This was unsuccessful because it was used through darts that are similar to tranquilizers. So these essentially guns that they used would make noise when they fired off. So obviously this is going to spook the horses and make them even more fearful of any human interaction. Secondly, there was no way for them to tell which ones had and had not gotten the dart shot, so they were giving certain horses an extra dose while others weren't getting it at all. This was causing health problems because these horses have never had any sort of vaccination or essentially unnatural type of thing going into their body. So this was causing allergic reactions, some illnesses, diseases. So this was a very ineffective way to go through. The BLM this year has unfortunately increased the number of wild Mustangs being captured. And a recent Senate bill that is in the action of being passed could trigger mass slaughter. Major issue that they have with this is it does require shipment to Mexico. This supposedly humane slaughter does not help the horses at all with the stress factor, considering that they do have to obviously go to Mexico. That is typically a very, very long drive, and they're not put in trailers that are up to standards of their living. There are often too many in one, which causes injuries, spread of sickness. Weather has a huge effect on them if there's a drastic change. Say they're coming from a northern state to a southern state. So a lot of them arrive sick, injured, most likely don't get veterinary attention because they are going straight to a slaughterhouse. So this shipment to Mexico really does, aside from the fact of slaughter, pose a major problem, as it is not as humane as it is portrayed to be. Secondly, there's another bill that is working to make horse slaughter legal in the US again. There are positives of this. It is a obviously shorter shipment route, would be essentially safer for those wild mustangs. However, there are negatives, of course, to the fact of adding slaughterhouses back in the US. If we did make that legal again, there would most likely be a mass slaughter in the US of not only wild mustangs, but domestic horses that are no longer wanted. The BLM, or the Bureau of Land Management, is a very poorly run organization. Thus far, they've had no new ideas aside from the birth control, which didn't work, and the roundups to control the population of the wild mustangs, if that is so necessary. They rely on unsustainable roundups, and mustangs that are not adopted, which is a sadly large number, are kept in small holding pens that are designated just to them or sent to Mexico for slaughter. So the BLM really has a little bit of rethinking to do on how they work their organization for not only ethical reasons, but also financial reasons. They lose money with the use of helicopters and motor vehicles and the spending of any vaccine that they use on those horses to get them ready to be adopted. So our informed opinion is that there has to be a better way to get a true estimate of the number of horses instead of just quote-unquote fuzzy math to estimate or guesstimate how many horses really are in the wild. Because unfortunately, with all these roundups that we've had, there is a much lower number than there were before. Secondly, there should be a ban of choppers and motor vehicles that are used to wrangle the horses. Those were banned before, but unfortunately they are now legal again. This puts a lot more stress on the horses if we are going to do the roundups. There has to be a more humane way to do it. And thirdly, as for the issue of farmers and crop damage, if fences keep domestic horses in, there must be a way to keep wild horses out. So really, fences around properties would also be a very, very beneficial way to help farmers, which was a large concern, not as well as the settling of new land. So here's a short video.
I'm here because there's a roundup happening over in High Rock. It's California, Nevada.
The way these gathers work is the helicopter basically acts as a sheepdog, if you will. Basically, the horses are moving away from the pressure that the helicopter puts on them. He'll move the horses, and he'll bring them into that jute, and so now they're in a funnel, if you will. And they'll run into that first round pen, and then they shut the gate behind them. And then we can load them off that front pen into a little gooseneck trailer and take them to our temporary holding facility or our permanent holding facility.
Behind me are some studs that were free a couple of days ago and are now in the hands of man.
After we gather these horses, they are prepared for adoption, and the ones that aren't adopted go out to our long-term holding pastures in the Midwest.
It's really sad. When you spend as much time out on the range as I do, most of these roundups are not necessary. We need to do a better job of managing them on the range.